write the job description. That job description is going to help you decide what it is that you're looking for. It's going to make you, as that business owner, be crystal clear as far as this is what I want to give up and this is what I don't want to give up.
Mhm.
That job description is going to help you make a lot of business decisions.
Welcome to Talk Freelance to Me, the podcast for women freelance writers, 1099 independent contractors, and solopreneurs. I'm your host, Ashley Cisneros Mejia. For more than 20 years, I've worked as a journalist and freelance writer. Today, as a mom of 3 kids, I'm passionate about helping other women leverage the freedom that freelance offers. On Talk Freelance to Me, we're all about the business of freelancing. If you want to learn how to monetize your talents, make money on your own terms, and design a flexible work life that actually works for you, this show is for you. Before we get started, don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media platforms. Review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. Visit our website at talkfreelancetome.com for free resources. Join our email list to be the first to know about our latest offers. I'm beyond excited to introduce you to one of my favorite people. My friend Mara Shorr and I met when we were entering our first chapters in our entrepreneurial journey. Mara is an expert consultant in the business and healthcare space, specifically in aesthetics. So think plastic surgeons, med spas, really exciting and interesting clients that she has. For nearly 15 years, she has helped different practices all over North America with their operations, their administrative programs, their employee and recruitment needs to help them really boost their profitability and enhance their bottom line. Her award-winning techniques have led her teams to win prestigious awards, and lots of them within her field. She's also served as an editorial board member for industry publications, and she even authored a chapter in a textbook about business. In this episode, Mara shares some really tactical advice when it comes to implementing systems and thinking about the first steps when you're considering hiring a contractor or a VA in your freelance business. We also talk about her inspiring advocacy work, both in fostering animals, specifically dogs, and also being an advocate for children in the Guardian Ad Litem program, and also being a foster parent. Here's my conversation with Mara. I am so delighted to introduce to you someone that I, first of all, love, that I've known for like almost 15 years, who I am continuously inspired by, both professionally and personally, the amazing Mara Shorr. Mara, thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you so much. It's wild that we've known each other through so many different lifetimes together of different versions of ourselves, of just like personally and professionally. And those are the extra fun friends that you get to see the different versions of you with, right? And you get to see different versions of them and the ones that we get to cheer each other on through each and every version.
I love that idea of lifetimes because sometimes I feel that way, and I'm sure you do too. You do a lot of stuff, but sometimes I feel, gosh, I've lived like 4 times. Like I'm so tired of all of all of this from all of the adventures and stuff. But it is so cool to reflect on it. We met. Gosh, it must have been 2010-ish, 2011-ish, I feel like, through a women's group. And at that point, I think you were like head of marketing at a theater in town, right? I think that's where you were.
Yeah,
Or maybe
I
you were
was
with public
director.
radio.
Yeah, it could have been either one of those lifetimes
Right.
because I've had several. So, because I started out in the development department, i.e., fundraising with WMFE, which was at that point both NPR and PBS. And so they've since, and here in Central Florida, so they've since changed over. They're no longer a PBS station, they are an NPR station. And so they're now Central Florida Public Media. But I was started out in fundraising, doing several different things in their development department. And then I think like you and I are going, wait, which lifetime was it? I
They
was
blend together a little.
they do and we do. And the director of development for NZN Theater and the Florida Film Festival. And so I think that may have been the lifetime that we met
So,
because I would then go on to go out on my own and have a community relations and PR and fundraising consulting business. And you had recently gone out on your own. You and I have always been within a step or two of each other in
yes,
either direction.
yes.
And that's where I will never not say to people that you really having strong, confident women that you love and support and that love and support you makes all the difference because you and I, so many rounds, have said, hey, you've done this before. How did you handle this situation or
Yeah,
that situation? And well, you've gone out on your own. Well, you've gone out on your own. Well, you've done this freelance project. Well, you started a podcast. Well,
yeah,
you had a business partner and then didn't, and then I had a business partner and then
yeah.
didn't. And we've done so many different versions of that that I think to lean on each other has been so key throughout the years.
Oh, I love it so much. And I appreciate you so much throughout this journey,
Likewise,
these lifetimes.
the all
So
four
let's
lifetimes.
and one of the things I think our audience will love is the fact that you studied journalism, that you
I
were a
did.
writer. You do so many things. You're this expert consultant in the business sector and healthcare in the specific aesthetics world, which is so cool. You're always on a jet somewhere going to like a cool international conference and you're keynoting, you're training, you're doing so many cool things. Let's take a step back and talk about like this foundation. You've always been a communicator, you've always been a writer, and it's so interesting to see how you've leveraged that foundation in all of these new facets, these new chapters. Tell us how you got into this space. Like, what was the journey like to get to this consultant chapter that you're in now?
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for the written word. Always. I
Yeah.
was that kid that wrote and self quote unquote self-published books, right? Like the pop-ups that you would cut the two strips into pieces of paper and then make your own pop-up
Yes.
books. I was that goofy geeky kid. I was the high schooler that was happier with the friends in journalism and on our high school newspaper and happier hanging out with the high school newspaper kids than anything else. And I went on to have a journalism major. I was a journalism and communications major. And I had an advertising minor and a PR concentration. And so for those of you that are ever looking for a great school in communications, I always will shout from the rooftops the name for Central Michigan University. Their program was second to
Awesome.
none and still in my heart always will be. And the amount of classes that I took on AP style, where I
Mm.
still maintain that there doesn't need to be a comma after the last item in a list, right? Um,
Yeah.
I will go to bat for that. But I will say that having a journalism background has taught me so much, even though I am not a newspaper writer or a blog writer by trade, right? And so it, I think, really has taught me the art of communication. It's taught me the art of the written word and how to be well spoken, both whether that's verbally, whether that's in writing, whether that's in front of people. And for me, I would even go on to, after working at the radio station and after working and having the Florida Film Festival and my own business and going on to become a partner in another consulting company with a family member for about a decade and to
Yeah.
now where I am now in consulting. And I consult with cosmetic and aesthetic practices, i.e. plastic surgeons, board certified plastic surgeons and med spas. And I love it so much that I'm still writing for industry publications. I have an article due this week, right? So
Wow.
I have to double check the topic. So don't quote me. I still, all these years later, will write for industry publications, even if it's just an article a month here and there or putting something on somebody else's blog. It's still for me a passion, true and true. And I think there is nothing like a journalism degree to give you a foundation for almost any other job that you have.
I love that so much because there's been this discourse, I think, just about higher education in general, like in terms of what are you majoring in? Is there ROI, right? Like, should you do journalism because you love writing, or should you do something like engineering that pays well? And maybe, you could argue that the market has more demand for it. But I love what you're saying on just like this, the transferable skills, the ability to ask questions, the ability to research well, to be able to be objective and find out facts and be detail oriented to make sure you don't make a mistake. Like
Yes.
those are like core professional skills that I feel like you really can apply to other industries.
And Ashley, I love that you have said the one in particular is to ask questions. And
Mm.
because I so deeply want to blame the fact that I love asking questions. I find I always want my knowledge just to continue to increase. I want to be satisfied with the answers.
Mm.
I truly think that that is a journalist thing. It's a journalism thing that we're
Yeah.
constantly doing this. And I joke that on my grave one day, and I have no reason to think that's going to be anytime soon, but I joke with my colleague Amy all the time. And I said, on my grave one day, it's going to say, but wait, I have one more question. Because every meeting, hold on, I have one more question. If we're doing a software demo, I have one more question. I interview for my clients all the time. I do a lot of hiring for my
Yes.
plastic surgery clients, and I'm constantly asking questions and follow-ups. So I love that you even included something I hadn't thought of as let's blame it on the journalism degree, right?
But I love it too. And I'm thinking about you, and like you are one of the most well networked women that I know, like in my network, like you know a ton of people all over the world. And I think also like that curiosity and that being interested in other people and asking them questions and really like caring to hear the response. I feel like that's something everybody loves, like well networked people, people who are able to like make a connection. They are asking questions and really finding synergy and connecting in a great way. And I feel like you're a master at that. And I'm seeing that as like a through line too, with it
Thank
just
you.
like, yeah, like your ability to really make people feel heard. And I'm sure that that has to be a factor in your success in consulting, is that your clients trust you and you're asking those questions so they know that you're listening and you're caring and you're making connections. And that, I think that's a good lesson for all of us to
Thank
ask
you.
questions, ask good questions.
Ask good questions, ask the follow-up questions.
Yeah.
And the thing that they teach you too in journalism school is about, do you have the quote, right? Do you have that
Mm.
quote that you need? And
Yeah.
if you don't get the answer that you want the first time and or if you're not satisfied with that answer,
Yeah.
ask the question again in a different way. And sometimes it's really coming in handy. Not that I'm looking for quote unquote the quote anymore, right?
Yeah.
In the majority of what I do. But if I'm not satisfied with the answer, if I don't feel that that question was answered to its fullest extent, or if there's more follow-up, I ask it again in a different way and just to get clarification. So I think that really does come from just training upon training upon training when it comes to journalism.
That is so cool, Mara. And you described a little bit when you were talking about kind of your journey that you have done. I feel like you have done it all. You've worked in organizations and big organizations with lots of different departments. You did the solopreneur thing. A lot of our listeners are solopreneurs and they offer a service, whether it's writing like freelance, or some of them maybe do consulting like you're doing. And then you've had a business partner, you've hired people for yourself, and you've hired people for your clients. You've done a lot. When you first started in this entrepreneurship space, which can be wild, like the wild, wild
Mhm.
west,
Oh my gosh, yes.
what
Yes.
challenges did you face early on? What are the biggest lessons that you've learned from being your own boss?
So I think for me, I was much younger at that point when I started that, right? Age did not stop me. So I was in my mid to late 20s, depending. I mean, I was 26, 27 years old,
Yeah.
if that. And I think that people tend to underestimate youth. I think especially much more 15 plus years ago. So I
Mm.
had to work a lot harder to prove myself, and I had always looked young. Now I like to think I still look young. I'm also in the cosmetic industry, so let's be honest,
Yeah.
that's also very intentional. So
Yeah.
and maybe some use of Botox, not maybe, definitely use of Botox. I will say
Love
this
it.
on every stage and podcast. Let's just own it. But so I think I did. I had to work harder, and there seemed to be a disconnect because the words that came out of my mouth showed maturity, but visually it just nothing was matching, right?
Mm.
So there was that. I had to work harder, I think, than somebody else would have. But I will say too that figuring out the systems that go into starting your own business, right? We did not have Instagram did not exist then, and
Yeah,
therefore neither did TikTok or Snapchat. I will say
right.
that MySpace existed, but we weren't sharing.
Now we're really dating ourselves.
I know we weren't sharing. Facebook did exist, but people weren't. It was really just to connect in like a person to person. It was not so businesses could connect with people. There
Yeah.
wasn't, the influencers weren't a thing at that point. And so there wasn't the amount of knowledge out there, right? I don't know that Etsy existed to go and download
Right.
spreadsheets and things like that. So I remember when it came time to send out my first invoice and thinking, how am I going to do this? And I remember going, Ashley, do
Right.
you have
That's
a
when you phone a
template?
friend.
And
Right.
right, I phoned a friend, and and you sent me an Excel spreadsheet template for
Yeah.
my very first invoice. And because it did not exist the same way that it does
Right.
now as far as how we communicate electronically and do those things and setting up the same systems. So I think for me, that was definitely one of the harder parts. And even now, when I watch my clients that go on to open up their own businesses and their own practices, setting up systems is one of the hardest parts. And I think that part of
Mm.
what makes me really great at what I do is I know what that's like and I've been there.
Mm.
And when my clients first set up, they're first a solopreneur and they go on to hire staff, of course. The
Yeah.
doctors go on to hire staff, but when they first start, it's just them. They're everything.
Yeah.
And so I really relate to that. So I think that was one of the hardest parts when I first started was thinking on the business side because the consulting services and the writing services, when you're your own business, just aren't enough. I never had the same issues as far as staying focused on the task that other people did. So for me, I'm always able to balance a schedule. And so
Yeah.
for me, it's not a matter of, oh no, how do I get my client work done? And well,
Right.
I do the same way as if I was in office. That's how
Yeah.
I make sure it's all done. So that
Yeah.
was never a hardship for me.
I love how you mentioned systems because I think that it can be exhilarating to grow fast. Like, so when you're a solopreneur, as you mentioned, like you are doing everything, you're taking out the trash, you're doing the actual work, you're invoicing for it, you're doing your taxes and or working with like a CPA on it, but you are doing everything. And when you grow and you realize that you need help, usually it's because there's client work, like you mentioned, getting your work done, figuring out how to get the work done
Mhm.
that you get paid
Yes.
for. And so it can be hard to take that discipline to take a step back to actually document, okay, how do we do what we do? And I love that you mentioned that because that's something that when I had a marketing agency with my business partner at the time, we grew really, really fast, which was exciting and was a blessing, was awesome. But we were just literally flying by the seat of our pants. And so then when
Yes.
it came time to train, we were like, how do we do this? Can you just learn by osmosis? Like, what do you
I
mean?
mean,
Like, can you just
right.
do it? Right. And it's like, no, of course they can't just do it, Ashley. Like,
No.
you have to teach them. And it's like, okay, well, where do you start? You have to like have some SOPs. You have to document
Oh my
how do
gosh,
we do what
yes.
we do? So people, Mara just dropped a huge gem. If you don't have systems and you have not identified that, documented that, like, please put that on your list because
I
it's a
would
big thing.
say yes, and do it. If you ever plan on hiring people,
Yeah.
do it. And sometimes I think we don't plan on hiring somebody until we hire them, like until you
Yeah.
either come across this perfect person or you're like, I need somebody and I need somebody now. And then
Yes.
several weeks later, hopefully, right, you find
Yeah.
somebody. When you're training that first person, do it then.
Mm.
Right. So don't wait until you're 5 people deep or 10 people deep. So if you're if you're a freelancer, if you're a one human operation, then okay, we'll give you a pass, right? Ashley and I will give you a pass now. But if you don't plan on remaining a one human
Right.
operation, then you need to start documenting everything and have that system in place, and something that is able to scale, so that if you're only ever keeping everything in all your to-do lists, and for example, like your email,
Mm-hmm.
in your inbox, like that's not sustainable once you have any
Right.
other human helping you, or if you're the person that's helping the other person grow. So if you're freelancing for another company and they say, "Oh, I just keep everything in my email or on my
Oh
phone," well, that doesn't
gosh.
work.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this so much, Mara. Like, I've heard of different tools. Like, I'm thinking, like, now because of AI and
Mhm.
ChatGPT, like, I know there's programs where you could like record yourself doing whatever you do. And sometimes it will even create some kind of outline. Are
Mhm.
there tools that you can recommend, maybe something that's cost effective, or like, if someone's listening to this and they're thinking, okay, yeah, I probably should do this, even on the scale where they are, maybe they're
Yeah,
not ready to, maybe they're just thinking about hiring their first virtual assistant to help them.
right.
What's an easy way for like a freelancer to do something like this, to start documenting?
So I would say I can give two tools and even using them together, right?
Cool.
So one, of course, we all preach about ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
So make sure you have the ChatGPT app on your phone, and have it like bookmarked on your computer. And then the other one is Loom. And
Oh,
so for those
yes.
of you that don't use Loom, basically does it's like if you were to record yourself on Zoom just doing doing a screen share, but it's not meant for meetings. It's really meant to record what you're doing on your screen. So
Mhm.
you can then a couple different components with using those tools. Number one, if you're using Loom to say, this is how you can find the report. You open up your computer, you log in, and
Mhm.
then you go to this screen, you go to this screen and say it, verbally say out loud. Then you want to go to this drop down. Then you want to go to this drop down and record yourself. And that will give you, so say it's a 3 minute video or it's a
Yeah.
5 minute video. Keep them short and sweet. Don't do an hour long at a time, but for every process or protocol or thing, do one. Go ahead, save those videos so that you have a place that you have these videos saved. So if somebody does better by learning visually, that the person that you're
Mm.
teaching, they can actually go in and you've already done this. You've already created these videos. But one thing that I did the other day for a client is I had a colleague of mine record these couple of videos on Loom, and then they have a transcribe button. So I hit transcribe and copied the transcription into Chat GPT and said, make a protocol out of this. And
Awesome.
so I didn't have to go in and dictate anything. I
Yeah.
didn't have to listen and re-listen. I didn't have to go in and edit and proofread the transcription myself. It did. The only thing I did was go in and take a couple screenshots, add it into a Word doc, and boom, it's saved. They now have step-by-step instructions of how to pull a certain report that they needed. And I can't tell you how many processes and protocols I've just said to Chat GPT, I need a process for this, and you get as granular as you
Mhm.
can. And that gets you like 75% of the way there. It's not going to get you 100% of the way there. So you still have to go in and customize it. But I've used ChatGPT and Loom so many times.
This is amazing. Guys, I
Mhm.
hope you listening out there realize that you have just witnessed gold. Yeah,
You
you can
have to know I say you have to make sure you're an expert in what you're doing, but it's going to
yeah.
save the time that it would take you to get that knowledge out of your brain
Yeah.
and send those beautiful fingers across the keyboard and
Yes.
brain dump it, right? And then if you get sidetracked and the dog has to go out mid-process or protocol that you're writing, right? So
Yeah.
that's where I say it's going to save you that manual time, but you have to know enough and be that expert in your field to go in and say, is this really what would happen? Think through the process and protocol.
Mm.
No, I want to add these three steps here. I want to add this thing here. So you need to know that it's correct,
Yeah.
but yeah, we don't need to be doing it manually because there's more than enough other things you need to do manually.
Amen. Oh my gosh, it's like a whole new world. When you were talking about you
Yes.
don't need to dictate, like I remember doing interviews with people like writing, and I would
Yes,
literally listen
same.
and dictate. And I mean, it's just mind blowing now
Yes, same.
that there's all these tools that will do it for you guys. Really, we have no excuse now. Like you
No.
said, it will get you 75% of the way, and then you can do the other 25.
And the other one I want to toss in for anybody that's not using Calendly or some sort of
Mm.
scheduling tool to chat, like we should not be, oh, are you available on
Oh my
Wednesday? I
God.
can't do Wednesday, but I could do Thursday. Can you do Thursday at 10? Oh, no, I'm not free till after 2. No, we are
This
too,
is
and
my
oh,
life, right?
well, I was free 3 days ago when you sent that email, and now I'm not free anymore. So, so use a scheduling tool to schedule all of your meetings. And I love Calendly. It actually, we talk about freelancing world. It can
Yeah.
check multiple calendars. So it can check my Gmail. It can check, I freelance and I'm not freelance, but I really am an independent contractor
Yeah.
with a consulting company called Brinson Anderson Consulting. So it checks that calendar and
Awesome.
it checks it can check as many calendars as you want it to so that you don't have to go in and do all of that manually. And it makes the process so much quicker. I have my clients, hirees and candidates for jobs. I have them
Yeah.
schedule their interviews there. It's just the way to go. So I like Calendly. It has a free version. There's a paid version. I get paid nothing from any of these. I think M365 as a scheduling tool. I just
Yeah.
don't know that it will speak to multiple calendars. So that's
Right.
what I like about Calendly.
So good. And guys, I'll include these awesome tools in the
Thank
show notes. So
you.
if you don't remember and you can thank Mara, maybe you should go get an affiliate link for
I
these
should see
because
if they
these
have
are
one,
really
right?
super helpful, right?
Yes.
I love it. I love it. So, one of the things that I loved when I follow your Instagram, I follow you on social media, is to see where is Mara today? Because you speak at so many amazing conferences for your industry. And I feel like I've seen you like keynote, like so many times now. And that's amazing. Can you tell us about how you use your writing and your communications background to really create speeches that are going to resonate with different audiences? Can you give us maybe some tips if we want to write speeches or kind of get into that as a service?
Yeah. So I think that number one, knowing your topic, right? Knowing that topic. And I think writing speeches and writing lectures for yourself is very different than doing it for other people.
Mm.
Um, I know I know my subject matter inside and out. So when I give and somebody says, oh, can you give a 15-minute talk on? I'm like, oh, that's easy. I could talk for 15 minutes about processes and protocols, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I only speak about what I know I'm myself, I'm an expert in, right? And I think that's not being cocky. It's just being confident.
Yeah.
And as women, especially, we need to get over this, oh, but somebody else can do it better. No, we are experts in our subject matter and we need to own that. So I'm also a big fan of collaboration over competition. So for me,
Yeah.
it's not this person does this better than me, and that so I should stay small and quiet. I learned to get over that a long time ago. But I will say that when you are comfortable in your subject matter, it's not like when you're assigned a random speech in speech class, right?
Right,
You
right.
had to give a topic on something that you knew nothing about. So you have to memorize the facts as well as memorize giving this presentation. So for me, it's also knowing my presentation style, to be honest, and owning it. So
Mm.
there are people that get up and they give a really great, serious talk. I would rather get up there and add humor and it be
Yeah.
more lighthearted. I love to give real life examples. And not everything involves a joke because there's certain topics that
Sure.
don't involve a joke, and there's certain times that they're a topic that they're really a joke there is no place for. But I have to know, and I always come up with examples as well, right? I love to give examples of things in my talk. So it's real and it's true to life. And I think that at the end of every talk, you should always have that call to action and you should always make sure that the audience knows how to find you and where to find you at the end, because otherwise you're just leaving everyone hanging. So that's where I would say really those are my top tips for when it comes to speaking. And the rest, look, if you're not a designer, I also love Canva. So
Yes,
it's
same.
designed for non-designers. I'm not a graphic designer at all. And I do a lot with Vanessa, who I know you had a previous
Yes.
podcast episode. You and I geek
Yes.
out over
You,
Vanessa's
yeah,
brilliance.
you introduced me to Vanessa.
Oh,
Thank
she's just
you.
amazing. So
She is.
she's also so incredibly brilliant. But
Yeah.
when you know what you're not, i.e. graphic designer, then if you say, look, I need somebody else to design my slides, that's okay too, right? Like, don't try and be everything. But I truly think that when you know your topic, that's going to make all the difference. So it's taken me far. And I use conferences and lectures and speaking and public speaking. I use it to leverage my message if it's a message that I really want to get across. And I've also used it as business development. So I think that's
Fantastic.
something that we all need to remember, that it's a great business development tool.
This is so, so helpful. I think a lot of people are going to, even thinking about themselves as, writers or editors in a certain industry, thinking about maybe they've never thought about being a speaker, but talk about having expertise in a certain vertical. A lot of the writers that I've talked to, they write about a specific niche and they know everything there is to know about whatever that topic is. And what a
Yes.
cool way to think about developing their business in marketing their services. That's very
Yes.
cool.
I've also gotten very niche on where I speak and why. And
Mhm.
so for me, there's certain conferences that I go, well, my goal is business development, but there aren't people that are going to be attending that conference that are going to be my target audience. I don't need to be everywhere all the time. And I don't need to
Right.
travel all across the continent if I don't think that it's going to make sense from a business development perspective, or if it makes sense from a vendor relations perspective. So for me, it has to meet one of those two criteria.
That makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. I appreciate that. Earlier, you were mentioning expanding your team and training, and I know that you do a lot of interviews and help with the recruitment process for your clients. Can you talk about if a freelancer is listening is ready to expand their team for the first time and they're nervous about that because they've done it all themselves this whole time? What are some of the first things that a freelance business owner should consider when they're ready to hire someone?
Write the job description, because number one, you're going to need it to post on Indeed or
Yeah.
LinkedIn or wherever, right? So you're going to physically need that document anyway. But that job description is going to help you decide what it is that you're looking for. And it's going to make you, as that business owner, be crystal clear as far as, this is what I want to give up and this is what I don't want to give up. These are my
Mm.
non-negotiables and these are the negotiables. And I think especially when you hire for the first time, you need to be very, very aware of what that is. And there's a lot of things you may not have thought of before.
Yeah.
And also in that job description, when it comes time to post, you start thinking of, well, do I want somebody full-time or part-time? Am I going to be able to afford benefits or
Yeah.
not? And if not, what am I going to do? Do I offer a stipend? Do I hire another freelancer? So you have two freelancers. Is it a service that maybe once you look at it, maybe I don't need a biller. Maybe I need a billing company, right? Maybe I
Mm.
don't need a bookkeeper. Maybe I need to just hire a bookkeeping service. And so that job description is going to help you make a lot of business decisions, not just be something that you slap on a job board.
Oh my goodness. This is gold too, because I feel like I've seen,
People do it backwards. They do it
yes.
backwards. And your employee handbook, which you don't need an employee handbook when you're one person, just be a
Right.
good human, govern yourself accordingly. When you have your very first employee is when you should have an employee handbook, because that's also going to give all the rules and regs and guidelines of what's okay with your company, that as a freelancer, you didn't need all of that, because again, be a
Right.
good human, govern yourself accordingly. And all the details are in the contracts that you have with your current clients. And we're just going to assume that everybody knows, as a freelancer, you should have a contract with all of your clients.
Yes.
We've all made that mistake at one point or
Oh
another.
gosh. Yes.
You're not
Yes.
alone.
Yes.
If you are doing it now, and just know, if you haven't been burned yet, good. I'm proud of you. I'm glad. It's probably a yet. So always have contracts.
So good. So good. Another fantastic reminder. Mara, you're amazing. You're amazing. We've talked a lot
Yeah.
about business, and on the
Yes.
onset, I was sharing how inspired I am from you personally because you are a person who, gosh, when it comes to talking the talk, walking the walk about things that you care about, your passions, really exuding love in making love a verb, not just this fluffy concept, but the compassion and care that you have for animals and for people. I mean, it's a whole nother world. So you've fostered dogs for years and years and years. In the last several years, you've also been a foster parent, foster mom. You advocate for children as a guardian ad litem. I want to talk about all this. Let's talk about the pups first, because I think that was
Okay.
first. How did
Yes.
you become a dog mom, and how did you enter this world where you have taken in so many cute, beautiful animals along the way in your journey?
Yes. Okay. We've always grown up with animals. So for me, that was like the non-negotiable in my world as soon as I graduated college, because I always grew up with animals. And it's so funny to look back on my childhood at what I thought was totally normal to have, several dogs and guinea pigs and rabbits and birds and turtles and fish and like the wild rabbit that had to come live inside and
Right.
like all of the, and I thought this was what everybody did, right? Like I thought this was normal. Thank you, Mom, by the way, if you're listening, for making me think that this is very normal growing up. But apparently not everybody had like 10 to 12 animals at a time.
Had our own zoo.
And right, their own zoo. Um, but because so there we are. And I joke that I'm very much like my mom was when she was my age, right? And so I joke that I'm like that version of her. So we grew up fostering through German Shepherd Rescue up in Pennsylvania. And so for me, that was just something that we did for several years when I was younger. And so now it was my COVID hobby, right?
Ah,
So when by fall of 2020, we had newly adopted our puppy Vincenzo Moish Shore Similo, aka Vinny, right?
love
And
his name.
so, yeah, good old Vinny, who's now 4.5. But we'd adopted Vinny, and we knew that eventually we'd want another dog, but we weren't quite sure when we were going to adopt another dog. And so I said to my husband, "What do you think about fostering puppies?" Like it was COVID, we were stuck
Yeah.
at home, inside all the time, forever, and everybody was on Zoom. We had happy hours on Zoom, and we had meetings on Zoom, and we did podcasts on Zoom, and classes on Zoom, and meetings on Zoom. And I was done. I was like, I cannot have one more Zoom hobby. I need
Yeah.
something that's done in front of a screen. And so we joke and we're like, well, if we had to be essentially almost in like a lockdown, right, during COVID, isn't it better to be in lockdown with a puppy than a lockdown without a puppy? Like we were home all day, every
Yeah.
day, and we went nowhere. And so we started one dog at a time. And we've only ever really fostered one dog at a time. And we've done one at a time, 35 different dogs. So
35.
yeah. So
Wow.
we went from keeping puppies for weeks until they were adopted. And sometimes another foster with the rescue said, "Hey, I'm going away this weekend. Would you mind hanging on to my dog for a couple days or the weekend?" I'm like, "Absolutely, sure." So, we don't have anyone. And my friend described how we did this to her son, who was only a couple years old at the time. And she described it to Thomas as the Vinny Hotel, right? That's like, because her son was only a couple years old. So she's like, "How do I describe this?" She's like, "It's like a
Yeah.
hotel." So yeah, so we've currently had our foster for a very long time, sweet Scooby, still looking for a home. He's been with us for 13 months. He wears a belly band. He is special needs and had injuries when he was a much younger dude. So
Mm.
Scoops has been with us for a while, but we call his belly bands pants. And I say he's got a great collection of pants, the ones that are printed like jeans. I call them his jorts. So if
How
anybody's interested
cute.
in a special needs bully boy that wears jorts, my husband tells me that the selling point is not all of his pants. He comes with so many pairs of pants. This Mara,
His
that's
accessories.
right. He's like, "Babe, that's not a selling point for this dog to get adopted. But if you're out there, human that works from home and is freelancing and loves a good special needs
Hey,
bully,
this is a good audience, right? For
right?
Scooby.
I may not pitch my other services, but I'm gonna pitch the heck out of Scooby." But he
I
has his
love
own
that.
highlight on my Instagram. So Scooby with Little Rascals Rescue. But anyway, so
Cute.
with that, that's how we got into fostering dogs. And I joke that it's like the weirdest MLM scheme is that once you start fostering, you convince your other friends to foster dogs too. And
Oh,
then they convince their friends to foster. So that's my version of a multi-level marketing scheme is
I
like I will go on that one. So the other part, which is, the pivot here is that back in 2019, my younger brother had lost his battle with drug use. And so he had been addicted for a very, very long time, probably close to 15 years. And so he passed away in February of 2019. And then my grandmother, who I was also her power of attorney, I was her healthcare
yeah.
surrogate. I always used to say that anybody that ever heard me talk about life, heard me talk about Babja, other than my
Yeah.
husband, he had like the biggest piece of my heart. And so when she passed, it was literally February 29th of 2020. So like she passes and then we had her memorial 2 weeks later. And then the entire world shut down. And I sat at home with all this grief. Also, why we adopted a puppy.
Yeah.
So with that, as time went on and I was I'd been healing more from the grief, I was talking with one of my very best friends who had been sitting on the board of Legal Aid Society with the Orange County Bar Association. And so she said, have you ever thought about serving in the Guardian Litem program? So in Orange County, Florida, you need to be a lawyer to be on the GAL program. But they have created a sub program under this called Volunteer Advocates for Children, similar to like what a CASA would be in other counties and other states. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And so I was like, what do I know? I don't know anything about foster care. I'm not a
Yeah.
lawyer and I don't have kids. So I know nothing about this. And she said, between your brother, so between Jordan and between Babja, you are more equipped than you really think you are. Have a
Mm.
conversation with the volunteer coordinator. And
Wow.
I did. And of course, another question and another question, another question, right? She
That's a
always jokes. She's like,
question.
come to me with your questions. But I went on to get the certification for the advocacy program. The day of my background check and my fingerprinting, I was assigned to a kiddo that very day was coming into care. And we joke that it was basically meant to be. And our families have years later almost merged into one blended modern family. And so that little girl was then 8 years old. She's now 11. And so our family is very much, I talk with her caregiver who has since adopted her almost daily, if not every other day. And I'm going to go see her play at the Shakespeare Theater camp tomorrow. So
Wow.
we, however, would find out that her cousin was also in foster care. Both of her cousins had been, and the older of the two girls had already aged out of foster care at that point. But the other was 16, about to turn 17, and living in a group home. And I would go on to become the teenagers advocate. And when that was no longer working out with her placements, yada, 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 right? There's always a good Seinfeld style yada, yada, yada with the ellipses.
Yes.
So she came to live with us. And so Hayden was 17. So I say that some people get their kiddos when they're like fresh new babies. And I got mine when she was 17 with multiple tattoos. Like that's how mine came to live with us. And so she lived with my husband and I for a year and has since launched. She has her apartment and she's taking college classes at this point. She has two cats and a kitten. One of the cats was a stray that gave birth in her bathroom sink, which is how she ended up with three.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that beautiful little baby kitten was a surprise to all of us. It's very much something that I am incredibly passionate about, and I still advocate for kids dealing with the system and the Department of Children and Families and dealing with that system because it is a mess of a system. And I constantly am looking for new ways to take my ideas into action, which is where I created a whole separate Instagram account around that and am now exploring how else I can help and support families that are dealing with similar issues. So we are not looking to have anyone else. I tell my husband that my goal is that none of my other interests or my other passions will come live with us. And
Right.
I have made that promise to him that none of my other passions in life will come live with us. So I'm trying to keep that promise because we still have Scooby here and Hayden is very much still a part of our world. So I just say she's my teenager. She's 19 years old now and see her on average once a week. Sometimes it's twice, sometimes it's every other week, but we are well all in that same orbit. I think it's something that I'm passionate about and I've used and am using all of my skills, whether it's presenting, whether it's public speaking, whether it's writing when it comes to social media posts, whether it is how can I do more using all of those things that I've learned in journalism, including asking the tough questions. You want to talk about a place where you need to ask more questions, it's the foster care system. Like we need to be asking questions all the time. And so I know it drives everybody bananas that works with me, caseworkers included, right? But it's always one more question, one more question. So if anybody listening has ever thought about becoming an advocate, that really is a beautiful yet heartbreaking way to help.
Wow, Mara. I am just like, there are no words, right? Like, that is the ultimate level, I think, of getting involved and
Mhm.
making an impact. There's lots of ways that we as people, when we're touched by a
Yeah.
issue, a cause, sometimes we might volunteer, we might donate, pull out our checkbook, we might, help with an event. But for you, literally opening your home, your family, um, that's huge. Like, I don't know how much more you could give. What, give a kidney? Maybe don't do that, but if you want
Right
to.
now, luckily, no one in our crew currently needs a kidney, so we are set.
Good
Nobody's
there.
asking me for any organs. I mean, the teenager
Yeah.
has borrowed my car, but that's as far as we've gotten to requiring a kidney.
I've heard
Um,
that foster parenting is so hard. How has that impacted your life? How has this changed you? Has it changed you? What have you learned from this?
I think it can't not change you
Yeah.
in one way or the other, and I I see so much of where things could have taken such a different turn,
Mm.
right? In each of the lives of the kids that I've advocated for. And I don't say that it's because I personally stepped in. I often say this and not to be self-deprecating or looking for praise, but I say I am not special, right? And when I say I am not special, I don't mean this in a let me get down on my way, on myself way. I mean, I don't possess skills that other people like don't possess, right? It's not that or I don't possess, yeah, I don't possess any skills that other people don't. It's not that I possess this magical thing, right? I have the ability to ask questions and the ability to have compassion for others and want to make the world a better place. And like those are the skill sets that you need for this, right? And maybe just submit a report here and there.
Yeah.
There's nothing about that says only Mara can do this, right? So many people can. And I think we often think, oh, I can't do that because I could never do that because, but everybody can help in some way. And I will say that I wouldn't be able to do and advocate the way that I do if there weren't other people coming alongside me doing the one-offs and I wouldn't be able to go and drop off an entire car of suitcases to the only
Yes.
county run group home if other people didn't say, I can't necessarily have somebody come live with me as a foster parent right now, but I
Mm.
can give you my suitcase.
Yeah.
So that's where there's really I think a disconnect. Sometimes people think like, oh, it's just a one-off, right? It's yes, please do that,
Mm.
right? And it's so incredibly helpful, just even if that's what people have the capacity to do, because there's so much of a gap between donating money and having somebody come live with you, right?
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I will not say that it was easy. It was not easy for any of us. It was not easy for myself. It was not easy for my husband. It wasn't easy for Hayden. And there's a saying that when it comes to especially dealing with kids that have been through the foster care system and those that have been in it for so long, that it's like when you've been in the cold and you've been in the freezing cold for so long, even lukewarm feels like burning hot. And that so much was true where it had been so long since she was in a loving home, that it had been years since she was in like an actual home where she was loved and appreciated, that it often sometimes would feel like it was too much. And so the behavior we all had to figure out, and I call them trauma landmines, right? I would say or do something, or she would say or do something, and then the other would react, and we'd go, wait a minute, what is this? Why are you reacting that way? Why are you reacting that way? But it really, we had to figure it out. And I think no differently than would I assume, because we never had bio kids of our own, right? When your own biological child goes through as they get older and the relationship that they need is different than the one that they needed a couple years before, right? There's different levels of attachment, different ways of attachment. And so knowing how to roll with those punches. Now we do doctor's appointments together. We're helping her furnish her first apartment. So there's a lot of hand-me-downs. She says her aesthetic is free 99. And a lot of like Taylor Swift memes back and forth. So that's where we are. But yes. But I will say everyone can help in some way, right? Everyone can help in some way.
Yeah. Gosh, that's what an example. What a beautiful way when you were talking about like your grief that you had with losing your brother and your grandmother. They say like grief is love that has nowhere to go.
Yes.
And you have taken that love
yes.
and it's overflown, and look what you've created. Like, look at the impact where you've taken this grief and you've allowed it to give life in other ways, to start other things, to make an impact in 35 dogs and in the lives of these young people and in Hayden's life, and the ripple effect it's going to have as she continues to navigate, being a young adult and starting her life. And it's going to be, from Mara, like that's a huge, what a legacy and what an inspiring way and a challenge maybe to those of us listening to really think about what we can do, to ask ourselves more questions. And instead of saying, oh, I can't, well, what can we do? Like you mentioned that there's that large gap and there's lots of, little points, right?
I would love that anyone that has any questions about anything that we talked about, right? I have 2 Instagram accounts. One is simply at Mara Shorr. So that tends to be more all of my daily life. So whether it's the business side or the dogs, some of what I do when it comes to advocating with foster care, but that's like all of life. And then I created a separate account just for the advocacy, which is at Mara Advocates. So I would love anybody to reach out if you have any questions about anything that we talked about. I'm always here to say, absolutely, let's chat more. And yeah, if I can offer you a piece of advice or something, anything, I'm here for it. I think we all do this together and it's collaboration all the way. I love a good collaboration.
Same. Thank you, Mara, for everything, for your friendship, for sharing space with us today, for inspiring the audience, for everything that you do to make an impact in the professional world, in the lives of so many. You rock. And I just want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Sending so much love your way.
Thank you. And with that, we've come to the end of another episode. Please make sure you hit subscribe and give me a 5-star review on Apple. Check out the show notes and grab my free Niches Get Riches freelance writing worksheet to brainstorm the best niches for your writing business. Until next time, this is Ashley Cisneros Mejia. Don't forget, we all get this one precious life. Don't constrain yourself to a box that you were never meant to fit in. It is your right to profit from your own creative gifts. Our music was composed by Donna Raphael of World Instrumentals. Talk Freelance to Me is a product of Phoenix Creative Studio.